Welcome back to Basics. This is episode 16, and we're going to be going to Duna with our new craft, but first it probably needs a pilot, I think. So we have the red horizon, and I've now told you it's going to be going to Duna. We're going to do something a little different around Duna, though, when it's going to land. But before we actually can send it there, it's got a science crew. It's got an engineer in the form of, I think, is it Bill? Bill's up there. He's decided he's Bob's gone to Elu and Jeb's doing all his test flying. He wants to do something, so he's put together the Red Horizon. It's very much a technical craft. It's very advanced. It's got lots of special things going on with it. But he can't fly, and neither can the two scientists he's put on board. So we're having to send up a pilot in this special little craft. We could have loaded up the Red Horizon originally with a pilot, but you will see the craft that I bring up here has actually got two purposes, which you'll see part of today and part of in a couple of days. So you can see it's got its own antenna, things like that. It's got its parachutes are hidden away. It's using one of the Mark 1 cockpits. And it gets itself into orbit with that engine. I was actually expecting at this point to get rid of that stage. I think I could have probably slimmed down this craft even more. I was trying to be very sort of simple with it, but I could have probably actually simplified it a bit more for the task that it had to do. Anyway, it's going to get its rendezvous. It's designed to also work independently of other Kerbals, so it can actually work on its own, which comes in important in the future. But at the moment, we have a pilot on board, and he's going to be very interested in doing some flying to Duna. Last time he hid away trying to make out that he was an engineer or a scientist, and he snuck his way there. This time we're actually sending him. It's like his penance. You must go back to Duna. So we set up our rendezvous. I put an alarm just in case on the alarm clock. I love that mod. It's one of the few that we have installed, but it's one that I think every install of KSP I think you should get the alarm clock if you're planning on doing more than one mission at a time. And then it's just a standard rendezvous. This craft is beautiful, absolutely beautiful for doing rendezvous. It's so maneuverable. I think if I was doing a set of missions where I needed to do a lot of moving crew around, I'd build something very similar to this. And at the moment, it's got that engine on the back that's actually, the balance is a little off with it. However, once we get rid of that, it's perfectly balanced. It can do a lot of sort of translations and stuff really easily. I originally came in and I thought I'll do the lazy dock. We'll just do the MacLeod point at docking port and whatnot, and it was not going well. The craft is actually too good for this. So yeah, we fire that. That's the worst way you could ever do that. You notice I fire the spent stage at the actual craft that we're coming in towards, which you don't ever do that. Never do that. In real life, in the space program, they would actually even control the burn position. So when you were doing burns, they would actually make sure the engines were faced away from the space station. When you undock a craft from the International Space Station, interestingly, it will actually be at such a point that it actually floats away in the orbit from the release force. And only when it is a certain distance away will it actually be able to fire its engines. So I come in for a dock, and you notice the whole top of this thing is going crazy. It's like jelly. One thing I had forgotten is that you actually need to lock all of the joints and stuff that I've actually got installed here. So I click around, I'm like, okay, we need to fix it, and I fix it temporarily. They've obviously undone themselves while I've been away. And I start to think, I'll just dock on this underside here, just the nearest docking port. But I've thrusted forward, and no, let's go back to the proper one. Let's just do it properly. So I'm not going to do the lazy docking. I'm actually going to do a proper docking. I'm not going to move the target at all here. And I just bring it in. We line it up by eye. I should have jumped to chase cam. I did not. The target is drifting at an angle, and that is a problem for me because it is rotating. Something has introduced a rotation in it because it is no longer facing normal. However, I'm still able to get nearby, and I just push it in and we get it. Now, again, you can see that it's actually, 20 to 30 degrees off axis there, which shows you just how far it had drifted, and I'm not entirely sure why. So we offload our pilot, and we're going to leave this thing just floating We're just going to leave it floating at the moment because we don't need to worry about it. So back to the red horizon. So we basically fold away those arms because I realised they're actually introducing wobble that I really don't need whilst travelling. So we do a nice simple transfer to Duna. You've seen this before. You're burning outwards, so you're basically going to be burning towards the direction of travel for the planet, your planet. If you get yourself a rendezvous planet, brilliant. You can use MacLeod if you really want to. I tend to do it by hand just because, that I can be a little bit more picky about this, that, and the other. But, MacLeod, things like that, wonderful. This craft wobbles. If I was rebuilding it, I'd probably get something like Kerbal Attachment System and put some struts on it, or I'd design it to have struts, or I'd reduce the number of docking ports. Now, these are the senior docking ports. If this was the junior ones, yeah, it would probably lead to craziness. The other way to deal with this is actually to put your engines at the front and do the sort of rocket pendulum sort of system that was championed many years ago by a certain American rocket physicist who had the whole rocket pendulum fallacy problem, and he put his fuel tanks at the back and piped all of his fuel up to the top. It doesn't help stability normally unless you have a system where you've got docking ports and you're pulling it. But again, in the future, I'm going to show you something a little bit about that in an upcoming episode, because having that sort of pendulum approach to rockets sometimes has its positives. So we get our intercept with Duna. We fast forward through time, and we just prepare our craft. You can see everything's pretty much folded away. And we're coming in out very quick. That actually took about a year of real time, or half a year of real time, but Kerbal time, not real time. But we come into the sphere of influence of Duna, and again, it's just the usual play around with the maneuver nodes. Now, I have a lot of Delta V here, and this craft is not landing. Let me just be completely honest about that. It is not going to be a landing craft. What it is going to be is a station, with a difference. That's why it's got all the docking ports. I want to actually put something around Duna because Duna is one of those planets that actually you could put a little colony on. Duna and Layth are probably the ones most commonly sort of colonized by people. So I've got that in my mind that I want to put some space station somewhere. Alpha Station is not that impressive for us. I think, a station around Kerbin looking like that, it's a bit of a and we'll deal with that in the future. But for today, we're going to actually put a nice station around Duna. So we're sending this craft, and that's what it's going to be. It's got docking ports everywhere. I can put fuel on it. I can do all sorts of things. And the idea is that should we choose to explore Duna in more detail, we can actually fuel craft up. We can go up and down through the atmosphere. It can be a nice little sort of way station. So we're looking to put it into an equatorial orbit, and we want to put it reasonably close to Duna so things don't have to travel too far. So we've changed our route into the sphere of influence just to give us that equatorial orbit. And then we're just going to burn at periaps and bring that down. You can see this craft, interestingly, is a little bit less wobbly than it was, but more interesting than that, when it starts to burn, it tightens up. So you see, it stops wobbling as much as it was earlier. It is bad, but it's not terrible. And again, this is 4 times time acceleration. So those wobbles are highlighted quite a lot. Yeah, it could be worse. So it could be better, could be worse. Yeah, always the way. So we're burning away. You can see we've got quite a lot of fuel there actually left, but not much in the way of Delta V. This is a very heavy structure. We've got a lot of girders. We've got docking ports everywhere. We've got the science lab. We've got our command pods, our couplers. There's a lot of craft here. It's a big structure. And so we just do our burn until we get our capture. And it is a long burn. This is our longest burn. I could have gone for an aerobrake. I did consider it, but with a craft made up of multiple parts like this, there is always that chance that something just doesn't act well in the atmosphere, and you have a bit of a twist or something and everything snaps off. And if that was the engines, then the whole mission would be lost. And I didn't really feel the need to do that because we're carrying enough fuel to do this on its own. So we spin round to our new periapse and we're going to circularize there. Nice and easy. Yeah, pretty short burn. Again, we're going at 4 times, so even at that, yeah, not a problem. And then we're going to position ourselves into the normal, and yeah, we're going to, we're a space station, aren't we? Well, whilst space stations often have some engines, they don't normally have 4 big nuclear engines stuck on the bottom. So this is where something a little special about this craft comes in. We move the crew around, and what we're actually going to do is we had a little bit of a thing here. We move the crew around and then we undock some bits. So you'll see that middle section at the top there. We've put our pilot into it and we've undocked it. And then the drive section we're going to undock as well, because we don't need it. We're where we want to be. We don't need it anymore. We've got RCS thrusters if we want to change orientation. We've got reaction wheels. So now you will see that the drive section has very little fuel in it, but has a very high delta V. So our pilot, and I should point out, I have a limited number of Kerbals because I will not spend the vast amount of coin required to get more Kerbals. Our pilot's going to go back to Kerbin. It's a roundabout trip for him. It's, this is just his job. He's here to bring stuff out, and he's like a trucker. He's a trucker in space. He's delivered his bits, and now he's bringing his truck home. So now you'll see he's just going to come in and dock to his drive unit nice and easily, and we're leaving the space station behind. The space station has all those docking ports ready. They're going to be staying here. They can stay here indefinitely. In fact, they've got Bill with his understanding of what's going on with the structure, and we've got what I think we've got 16 docking ports on this space station. Anyway, this was interesting. I could not get the 2 large docking ports to dock for love nor money. And I actually pulled back out and went back in again because the first time they tried to dock, nothing, and then they magically docked when they weren't near each other. So I don't know what's going on there. Before we go, we've got to extend our docking ports and lock them in place nicely. So that will mean that any visiting craft can dock. We can put extra units on this. Again, because of the way that the senior docking ports are, we can expand this central column, but we could also add tanks around. We can do all sorts to this. So this will stay just in orbit around Duna, and I think it's quite a nice little structure. It could be better, but anyway, what we're going to do is return our pilot to Kerbin, because his job's done. We don't need him to be the pilot of a space station. They don't need it. So we're going to wait around until we get the right orientations of Kerbin and Duna. So that'll take a little while. We set our maneuver nose up and go, yeah, how long is it going to be? It's actually about a year. We fast forward time and blah, 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 blah. Wonderful. Yeah, you get a headache. You get the idea. So this takes a long time. Normally I have multiple missions going at once, but interesting, at this point I had finished most of our missions because we're coming towards the end of the series. We've got 2 more episodes to go before the end of the series, so I'm trying to tie everything up right now. And this was actually one of the final missions to finish. So we do our return to Kerbin. It's going to be a burn that's going to be basically retrograde to Duna. We're going to leave the sphere of influence and fly back down into Kerbin. There's going to be a lot of energy involved when we get to Kerbin. We want to come in ideally near the equator. And I allow it to actually be a direct descent because I can modify that later once we get towards Kerbin. And I know that actually, when we do the burn, it's probably going to be different anyway because nuclear engines take a while, and then we can trim it a little bit. So we do our burn, and we've got oodles and oodles of fuel left because we've obviously reduced the mass of this craft significantly by leaving the space station back in orbit of Duna. So there we go. We just work this round, and yep, I'm checking. We've got the right rotation. We've got a normal orbit. We're in the same direction as everything else, and that's important because I'm actually going to leave part of this craft in orbit. Because I want it to come down, and that does not have any parachutes. That's the one thing that I missed. But it also does mean is we could actually refuel this if we really wanted to. We could refuel this craft. However, you'll see in a minute why I decided not to do that. So put a save in because you know what, I'm getting towards the end of the series now, and I'm this is a long mission, and I could just imagine everything going horribly wrong and everybody dying. I was also aware of the fact that I may miscalculate my intercept with Kerbin. I'm still of the old school that used to have periapsis and apoapsis just move randomly when you change sphere of influence. So that's part of the reason why I think I do things like that. Anyway, we come into the atmosphere and we're going to come down quite low. We're going to try and lose enough of that energy so that we're not going to escape again. So we're in the 50 kilometer range, and yeah, solar panels. The solar panels keep burning up, right? Once we get past that sort of periaps, I turn on the nuclear engines because we've got 100% efficiency from then, and we bring ourselves down. We've caught around Kerbin, and now it's just a case of orbiting. What I could do right now is actually I could bring up our periaps, which I did a little bit. We brought it up just a little bit, just so we can still go through and we can do our little our aero brake. We just do a very shallow aero brake just to use a bit of energy up, and you can keep doing this if you want. You could keep cycling around, reposition your periaps, and just be happy to just lower that orbital speed down a little bit. And then, you know, it's not something you would probably do in the real world. I don't think there's any evidence of somebody doing this, but in Kerbal you can do that. You can use multiple passes to take the energy out. Now we're now going to use our RCS just to modify our orbit a little bit. I'm quite happy with the orbit we've got, so we're going to use some of the RCS up. We transfer some around just to try and make sure that we've got some everywhere. We do a bit of transferring. I have another problem with the fuel transfer thing. I'm sure I'm missing something with how to do fuel transfer really effectively. So we're going to leave this pod in orbit. Until next time, have a great one.